They call me Clara, Clara Vance. I'm 28, and I was standing on what I believed was the summit of my life. I was in a private dining room at the Pinnacle Room, the most exclusive restaurant in Chicago, with the city's lights sprawling beneath us like a blanket of fallen stars. This was my graduation dinner. After years of juggling 3 jobs to finance my MBA from the Atherton School of Business, this evening was meant to be my coronation. I had orchestrated every detail from the 12-course tasting menu and the vintage Dom Perignon to the room itself, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. I did it all with the desperate hope that, for once, my parents would see me, really see me. My new boss, Mr. Sterling, gave a glowing toast, and my favorite professors offered their applause. As the sound faded, my mother, Eleanor, leaned toward me across the vast expanse of white linen. Her smile was a piece of polished glass, flawless and cold. She leaned in, her voice a conspiratorial hiss that cut through the restaurant's gentle hum. "Richard and I were just saying," she began, her gaze like ice chips, "it would have been better if you'd never been born. But before I get into all of that, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss what's next, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. I'd love to know." The oxygen left the room. It was as if someone had hit a mute button on the entire world. Forks paused midair. An absolute deafening silence descended upon our table, and in that shattered silent moment, I did the last thing anyone would have predicted. I smiled. Because in that instant, I finally understood everything, who they truly were, and the person I was finally about to become. To understand that smile, you need to understand the silence I was raised in. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was a dense, suffocating silence, weighted down with all the compliments I never received, and filled to the brim with the praise that was constantly heaped upon my sister, Chloe. In the Vance family, love was a private club, and I wasn't on the list. I was just the one who paid the electricity bill so the rest of them could see. I was born 3 years before Chloe. For those first few years, I have a handful of vague, sunlit memories of being the axis on which my parents' world turned. The only tangible proof is a faded photograph on my father's desk at home. In it, I'm a chubby toddler with a riot of dark curls perched on his shoulders. He's looking up at me, his face stretched in a wide, unguarded grin. My mother stands beside him, her hand on his arm, caught mid-laugh. We look like a stock photo family, the kind that comes inside a new picture frame. That photo was taken before their real daughter arrived. Chloe was born a masterpiece. She had hair the color of spun gold that never seemed to knot, and eyes so blue they learned to smile before she could even form words. She was the artist, the prodigy, their shining star. My mother, Eleanor, saw her as a perfect sculpture she had chiseled from air. My father, Richard, was a quiet man, and he found it far easier to serve as my mother's echo than to find his own voice. So Chloe became their joint venture, and I was relegated to the role of stage manager. My job description was set early. When I was 8, I won a regional mathematics competition, scoring higher than anyone in the state. I sprinted home, the award certificate clutched in my fist, my heart hammering with the desperate need for them to finally see me. I burst into the living room to find them both fawning over a finger painting Chloe had made in preschool. It was a chaotic smear of purple and orange, but my mother held it aloft as if it were a lost Rembrandt. "Mom, Dad, look," I said, thrusting my certificate forward. My mother gave it a passing glance, a flicker of something, annoyance, in her eyes. "That's lovely, dear," she murmured, her attention already returning to the painting. "Now, look what your sister did. She has the soul of an artist." My dad just nodded. A true artist, that one. I carefully folded my certificate into a tiny, hard square and shoved it deep into my pocket. Later that night, I threw it in the trash. It was the first of many trophies I learned to bury. My skills were quiet, practical. They didn't glitter. I taught myself to fix a running toilet, to balance their checkbook before I was a teenager, to argue with the internet provider when the bill was inexplicably high. Chloe learned to play the cello. The hours of screeching notes that filled our house were, to my parents, a symphony. My silent competence was simply expected. It was like breathing. You only notice it when it's gone. The financial bleed started gradually. At 16, I got my first real job at a coffee shop, saving every penny for a beat-up old car. It was my ticket to a sliver of freedom. I'd managed to bank nearly $1,500, which felt like a king's ransom. One afternoon, my mother walked into my room without knocking, a habit of hers. "Clara," she said, her voice laced with manufactured distress, "we have an issue." Chloe needed orthodontic work, not standard metal braces, but the high-end invisible aligners because, as my mother put it, we can't have her perfect smile ruined by a mouthful of metal. Their dental insurance wouldn't cover the full amount. My mother's eyes drifted to the small metal box where I kept my cash. I didn't even need to hear the question. Her gaze was an invoice. "It's for the family, Clara," she said, as if that was a magic phrase that justified everything. Chloe's self-esteem is a priority. I handed over my savings. How could I not? Refusing would have been an act of rebellion I wasn't yet brave enough to stage. I tried to convince myself it was the noble thing to do. We were a family, after all. But a few months later, when Chloe's teeth were perfectly straight, my parents threw her a radiant smile party. They invited all her friends and bought a ridiculously expensive cake. No one brought up where the money had come from. No one ever said thank you. I was the one who served the cake and stayed behind to wash the plates. The silence in the kitchen was my only compensation. This incident became the template for my life. When I was accepted to college, it was a state university. "It's all we can manage," they'd said. I took on 2 part-time jobs to pay my own way. 2 years later, Chloe was admitted to a prestigious pre-med program at a private college with a breathtaking tuition. Suddenly, affordability was no longer a topic of conversation. My parents took out a second mortgage on their home, and when that still wasn't enough, the phone calls began. "Clara, sweetheart," my mother's voice would sing over the line. "Chloe's lab fees this semester are simply astronomical. We're in a bit of a tight spot. A tight spot. That's what they called my perpetual state of existence. I was living on instant noodles and wearing shoes that were falling apart so I could wire them money. But I always did. Each bank transfer was a silent prayer. Maybe this time. Maybe this is the sacrifice that will finally make them notice me. Maybe they'll finally say, 'Thank you, Clara. We couldn't do this without you.' They never did. The money was received like a tax, an obligation I was born to fulfill. I dared to mention my struggle once. I called home after a grueling 16-hour double shift, utterly exhausted, and admitted that I might not be able to send money that month. The line went silent. Then my father's voice came on, heavy with disappointment. "Clara, your sister is going to be a doctor. She's going to save lives. What you're doing, it's a small sacrifice for a much greater purpose. We all have to play our part. My part was to be the silent financier. Chloe's part was to be brilliant." I remember hanging up, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, and feeling a deep, hollow void open up inside me. I wasn't a daughter. I was a line of credit for their real daughter's future. I was a resource. The worst part was, Chloe wasn't malicious. She was just oblivious. She lived her life on a cloud of my sacrifices and our parents' adoration. She never questioned the source of the funds. When I'd visit for holidays, worn down and thin, she'd lament the stress of her midterms, and my parents would rush to her side, telling her to rest while I was implicitly expected to cook the meal and handle the cleanup. Chloe just floated, beautiful and bright, completely unaware of the scaffolding holding her aloft. I was that scaffolding. I got into the Atherton School of Business on a partial scholarship. It was a monumental achievement, a gateway to a world I had only ever dreamed of. But I had to cover the rest myself. The jobs became more demanding, the hours longer. The money I was sending home became an anchor dragging me down. I tried to tell them I couldn't afford to help as much. My mother's response was glacial. "I see," she'd said. "So your personal ambition is now more important than your sister's career." It was always framed as a choice, and I was always on the wrong side. But I kept going. I pushed through the exhaustion, the loneliness, the gnawing certainty that I was utterly alone. I told myself the MBA was the finish line, a degree from a top-tier school, a high-paying job, financial security. These were achievements they couldn't possibly ignore. They were loud and shiny and undeniable. I foolishly thought I could finally purchase their love. I thought I could present them with a version of myself so successful they would have no choice but to finally be proud. So when I booked that dinner at the Pinnacle Room, it was the culmination of a lifetime of trying. It was my final desperate bid for their acceptance. I chose the most ostentatious restaurant I could find. I wanted to surround them with irrefutable proof of my value. That night, as I stood in front of the mirror in my new dress, I saw a stranger looking back. She looked poised, successful, confident. But beneath the surface, I was still that 8-year-old girl with an award in her pocket, just wanting her parents to say, "Well done." That was my fatal flaw. I was still trying to draw water from a well that had been dry for over 2 decades. And as I walked into that restaurant, ready to claim my victory, I had no idea I was actually walking toward my own execution. The Pinnacle Room was a sanctuary of quiet wealth. It was a glass-enclosed jewel box at the top of a skyscraper, where every table offered a breathtaking panorama of the Chicago skyline. The moment you stepped inside, the city's chaos dissolved, replaced by the hushed clinking of silver on china and the low thrum of polite conversation. The lighting was golden and forgiving, glinting off crystal glasses and polished cutlery. Waiters moved with a silent, balletic precision. I had chosen this venue deliberately. It was a fortress of achievement. I reasoned that in a place like this, their casual dismissal couldn't reach me. Here my success was the main attraction. I'd invited my most valued mentors, Professor Albright and Dr. Petrova. I invited my boss, Mr. Sterling, a man who had seen my drive and had already offered me a senior analyst position at his investment firm. These people were my witnesses. They had seen my hard work. And then there were my parents, Richard and Eleanor Vance. They arrived looking like they owned the place. My mother in a cream-colored silk gown, my father in a perfectly tailored suit. They surveyed the room with an air of detached approval, as if they were the true hosts. The evening began with a deceptive warmth. My parents were on their best behavior, performing the role of proud parents for the audience I had so carefully curated. They smiled as Mr. Sterling told an anecdote about how I had rescued a multi-million-dollar portfolio with a brilliant, last-minute analysis. They nodded politely as Professor Albright lauded my thesis as one of the most original he'd seen in a decade. "Clara has a rare gift," Professor Albright said, raising his champagne flute. "She sees the underlying structure in the chaos. She's going to go very, very far." A warmth blossomed in my chest. For just a moment, I let myself hope. I glanced at my mother, and she was smiling, a seemingly genuine smile. She met my gaze and gave a small nod. That stubborn, foolish hope flickered to life inside me. Maybe this was it. Maybe tonight was different. Mr. Sterling, a man not given to flattery, added his own praise. "We're thrilled to have her. In 5 years, she'll probably be running my division," he chuckled. The whole table laughed along. The atmosphere was light, celebratory. It was everything I had dreamed of. I felt seen. The food arrived, a parade of exquisite dishes. The wine flowed. And with each passing moment, I relaxed my guard. My parents asked Mr. Sterling intelligent questions about his firm. They seemed interested. Their performance was flawless. The misstep came from Dr. Petrova. She was a kind, maternal woman who had been my staunchest advocate. She had no idea she was about to ignite a powder keg. She turned to my mother, her eyes shining with sincere admiration. "Eleanor, Richard," she said, her voice full of genuine warmth, "you must be bursting with pride. What Clara has accomplished, her work ethic, her intellect, it's truly extraordinary. You've raised an incredible woman." It was a simple, heartfelt compliment, but it was aimed at them. It asked them to take ownership of my success as a reflection of their parenting. And that, I was about to discover, was a bridge too far. The temperature at the table dropped. It was subtle at first, like a single bead of condensation on a warm glass. My mother's perfect smile didn't vanish, but it became brittle. She let out a light laugh, a delicate, tinkling sound completely devoid of warmth. It was the sound of a crystal glass cracking. "Oh, we're proud of both our girls, of course," she said, dabbing her lips with her napkin. Her eyes swept the table, a monarch addressing her subjects. "We're very lucky. But Chloe..." She paused, letting the name hang in the air, polished and heavy. "She's in medical school. She'll be saving lives. And that, well, that's a true calling, isn't it?" The convivial chatter at the table sputtered out. Dr. Petrova's smile froze. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat and developed a sudden, intense interest in the contents of his wine glass. The warmth in the room began to bleed away. I felt a familiar chill creep into my bones, the draft from the door that was always left open for the child they preferred. My father, ever the loyal second, saw his cue. He sat up a little straighter, eager to buttress my mother's point. He looked at Mr. Sterling, man to man, as if explaining a simple truth. "An MBA is wonderful," he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "A fine achievement. But it's not the same as being a doctor. That's about business, about money. It isn't a calling. Like medicine." His words landed like blows. In 2 short sentences, they had taken my years of struggle, my sleepless nights, my relentless grind, and reduced it all to a lesser, grubby pursuit. It wasn't just a preference for Chloe, it was a moral hierarchy. Her path was noble. Mine was merely lucrative. They hadn't just downplayed my success, they had devalued my entire character. Mr. Sterling, to his credit, tried to intervene. "I think ensuring hundreds of people have jobs and securing a stable economy is a calling in its own right, Richard," he said, his tone polite but firm. But my mother just smiled her serene, infuriating smile. "It's just different," she said, as if that settled the matter. And in that moment, everything inside me went still. It was a strange, terrifying calm. The flicker of hope from moments before was extinguished, not with a gentle puff of smoke, but like a bulb shattering, leaving only a sharp, ringing silence in my ears. All the ambient noise of the restaurant, the clinking and murmuring, faded into nothing. The only thing I could hear was the useless, frantic beating of my own heart. I looked at their faces. My mother, poised and elegant, secure in her verdict. My father, self-satisfied, proud to have supported his wife's pronouncement. They weren't embarrassed. They felt they had simply clarified things. They genuinely believed my life's work was a footnote in the epic tale of my sister. I had brought them to this temple of my own making, and they had effortlessly converted it into another shrine for Chloe. They had looked at all my hard-won glory, and with a few casual words, deemed it insufficient. It would never be sufficient because I wasn't her. My professors were looking at me with pity. My boss was looking at me with concern. And I knew, with a certainty as cold and clear as the ice water in my glass, that it had to stop. The trying, the performing, the waiting for a curtain call that was never going to come. The stillness inside me wasn't numbness. It was the eye of the hurricane. And the storm was about to hit land. I set down my fork. The sound of silver against porcelain was unnaturally loud in the vacuum that had formed around our table. I pushed my chair back, its legs scraping softly on the polished floor. I stood up. My hands were trembling, a fine, barely perceptible tremor, but my voice, when it came, was steady. It was quiet, but it sliced through the awkward atmosphere like a scalpel. "What did you just say?" I asked, looking directly at my father. He looked startled. In our family's unspoken hierarchy, I didn't ask questions like that. I didn't issue challenges. My role was to absorb discomfort and maintain the peace. I just said that being a doctor is a wonderful calling, Clara. There's no need to be so sensitive. "No," I said, my voice still quiet, still controlled. "That isn't what you said. You said my degree was wonderful. You said my life's work was about money. You sat here at a dinner I paid for in a restaurant I chose to celebrate an achievement I earned, and you used it as an opportunity to tell me I don't measure up to my sister." My mother let out an exasperated huff. "Clara, you're making a scene. You are embarrassing us in front of your guests." "Embarrassing you?" The question hung in the air. The stillness inside me began to burn, transforming into a cold, clear rage. I have spent my entire life dedicated to making sure you are never embarrassed. I have spent my life in the shadows, ensuring your lives and Chloe's life ran without a hitch. Do you have any concept of what it took for me to get here? I didn't wait for an answer. I didn't want one. I just wanted to speak the unvarnished truth for once. "I paid your bills," I said, my voice gaining strength. I looked at my mother. "When your power was shut off 2 years ago because you forgot to pay the bill, who did you call?" "Me. I paid it with my student loan money. The money meant for my food." I turned to my father. "When your car's transmission failed and you needed $2,000 for the repair, who gave it to you?" "Me. I worked double shifts for a month to earn that back." The words were a torrent now, a flood of suppressed grievances breaking free. And Chloe. Don't even get me started on Chloe. I have sent you money for her tuition, for her lab fees, for her apartment security deposit. I have bankrolled the life you praise so endlessly. I have single-handedly kept this family afloat with my money, with my sweat, all while you both acted like I was a distant, slightly disappointing relative. While you told everyone what a brilliant doctor she was going to be, I was the one making it possible. And you never once, not one single time, said thank you. My father's face was turning a blotchy, furious red. He was enraged. Not because I was wrong, but because I was saying it all out loud in front of these important people. His image as the proud patriarch was crumbling with every word. "That is enough," he said through gritted teeth, starting to rise from his chair. "You are an ungrateful child. After everything we have done for you, everything you've done for me?" A short, bitter laugh escaped my lips. "What have you done for me? You have taken from me. You have used me as a personal bank for your favorite child. You have treated me like an employee, not a daughter. The only thing you ever gave me was the space Chloe didn't occupy." Dr. Albright was staring at the floor. Dr. Petrova looked like she was on the verge of tears. Mr. Sterling had a look of cold, hard anger on his face, but it wasn't directed at me. It was for my parents. My mother stood up then, her face a mask of frigid fury. The pretense of the charming mother was gone, stripped away. Her eyes were chips of ice. She took a step closer, her voice no longer a whisper. It was clear, precise, and carried across the now silent restaurant. She delivered the words that had been hiding behind her polite smiles for 28 years. She spoke her truth. "We wish you were never born." The words didn't just hang in the air, they created a vacuum. My breath caught in my chest. It was a physical blow, an impact I felt behind my ribs. This was it, the final unspoken truth, laid bare under the golden lights of the Pinnacle Room. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It was that my very existence was a mistake. My father didn't contradict her. He didn't try to soften it. He just stood there, his red face a testament to his silent agreement. This was their united front, and that was the moment the trembling stopped. The cold rage inside me solidified into something hard and unbreakable. I looked at their faces, these two strangers who had raised me, and I felt nothing. The desperate, lifelong need for their love, the gaping wound that had defined my entire existence, simply closed. The fight was over. I had lost. But in losing, I had won something else entirely. Myself. I took a deep breath. My voice, when I spoke again, was barely a whisper. It wasn't for them. It was for me. Then maybe it's time I start living like I never belonged to you at all. I turned my back on them. I didn't look at my boss or my professors. I couldn't bear the pity in their eyes. I walked away from the table, my head held high. I could feel every eye in the restaurant on me, but I didn't care. My footsteps were steady on the polished floor. I walked past the beautiful floral arrangements, past the tables of silent strangers, and out through the large glass doors. The cool Chicago air hit my face. It felt like waking up from a long, terrible fever dream. I didn't look back. I just kept walking into the night, away from the family that wished I had never been born. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was walking toward home. I didn't cry. That's the first thing I remember about the moments that followed. I walked out of the gilded warmth of the Pinnacle Room and into the crisp, damp Chicago night, and the tears I fully expected to erupt simply didn't come. There was no hot surge of grief, no gut-wrenching sob. There was only the cold, clean air filling my lungs and the steady, rhythmic click of my own footsteps on the pavement. I walked for what felt like miles, my expensive heels marking a steady beat against the concrete. The city lights blurred into a watercolor of reds and golds that I saw but didn't register. My mind was unnaturally quiet. It was the kind of profound silence that follows a massive explosion. The dust was still settling, and I was just standing in the crater taking it all in. But the destruction wasn't new. The bomb had detonated years ago when I was a child. Tonight was just the first time I'd actually heard the blast. My phone began to vibrate in my purse, a frantic, insistent buzzing. I didn't need to look. I knew who it was. I kept walking. It buzzed again and again, a phantom limb, a connection to a body I no longer inhabited. I finally stopped under a streetlight, its lonely yellow glow pooling on the wet sidewalk. I pulled out the phone, 13 missed calls, 12 from my mother, 1 from my father. Then a text message preview lit up the screen. It was from her. I stared at the notification, my thumb hovering. A tiny, foolish part of me, the ghost of the girl who always hoped, wondered if it might be an apology, a panicked, regretful plea to come back. I opened it. The message read, "You embarrassed us, in front of all those important people. I hope you're proud of yourself." I read the words once, then twice. No remorse, no concern for me or what I might be feeling, only wounded pride. Her first thought was not for the daughter whose heart she had just publicly shattered, but for her own reputation. It was the final, irrefutable proof. I had never been a person to her. I was a mirror, and tonight I had reflected badly. I didn't reply. I just switched my phone to silent and slid it back into my purse. The buzzing stopped. The silence returned, complete and total. And in that silence, I felt the last thread of obligation, the last molecule of hope I had been clinging to, simply dissolve. I hailed a cab. As I gave the driver my address, my voice sounded eerily normal, as if I were returning from any other evening out. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window and watched the city slide by, feeling strangely detached, like a ghost watching the world of the living. When I reached my apartment, its emptiness felt different. Usually it was a space that amplified my loneliness. Tonight, it felt like a haven, a clean, quiet space that was entirely my own. I took off my shoes by the door and walked barefoot across the cool kitchen floor. I didn't turn on the lights. I just stood in the dark, looking out the window at a single blinking red light on a distant tower. I stood there for a long time, just breathing, in and out. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't sad. The absence of sadness was a shock. I had expected to be drowning in it. For my entire life, the thought of my parents' final, complete rejection was my greatest fear. It was the monster under my bed, the reason I worked so hard, the reason I gave so much. And now the monster had come for me, looked me in the eye, and told me I was worthless, and I had survived. I wasn't sad. I was free. The weight, the enormous crushing weight of trying to earn their love, was gone. It was a burden I had carried for so long I had forgotten what it felt like to not have it on my shoulders. Every decision, every sacrifice, every dollar sent, every insult swallowed, it was all part of that desperate effort. And now it was over. I had been given a definitive, undeniable answer. There was nothing I could do, nothing I could achieve that would ever make them love me. And the knowledge of that didn't break me. It liberated me. I wasn't crying. I was calm. The frantic energy that had fueled my life for years had finally dissipated, leaving behind a profound stillness. This was not the silence of neglect. This was the silence of peace, the silence of an empty battlefield after a long, pointless war. I thought about the word family. For me, it had always meant a debt I could never repay. It meant obligation, sacrifice, and a constant aching sense of inadequacy. Tonight, my membership had been officially and permanently revoked. I finally moved from the window and went to my bedroom. I let the expensive dress, the armor I had worn to my final battle, fall to the floor. I put on an old, soft t-shirt, feeling as if I were shedding a skin I'd been trapped in for 28 years. I lay down in my bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. The darkness didn't feel lonely. It felt like a blanket. It felt safe. The tears never came. I didn't need them. Crying is for when you lose something you value. And what had I really lost tonight? A fantasy, an illusion I had nearly killed myself to maintain. What I had gained was the truth. Silence isn't always defeat. Sometimes it's just peace, finally arriving. As I drifted off to sleep, for the first time without the familiar ache of hope in my chest, I knew I was finally truly on my own, and I was going to be okay. I woke the next morning to the pale gray light of a Chicago dawn. For a split second, a familiar dread washed over me, the conditioned anxiety of a new day of striving. Then, the memory of the night before returned, not as a stab of pain, but as a quiet, clear fact. It's over. The dread dissolved. I lay in bed, watching the light change, feeling a stillness I had never known. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was a blank slate. After a while, I got up, made coffee, and sat at my small kitchen table. The silence in the apartment didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like space. My space. I opened my laptop, the surface cool beneath my fingertips. There was no grand emotional plan, just a quiet, methodical certainty. It was time to clean house. I navigated to my bank's website. The login screen glowed with significance. I typed in my password and the page loaded, revealing the columns of numbers that represented my financial life. For years, I had viewed this page with a mix of strained pride and constant worry. The balance was a measure of how much I could give away. Today, it was just a tool, my tool. I clicked on the tab for scheduled payments. The list appeared, a digital ledger of my servitude. Transfer, Vance Mortgage, $600, first of every month. Transfer, Eleanor Vance, Utilities, $300, fifth of every month. Transfer, Chloe Vance, Tuition Support, $800, 15th of every month. There were others, for car insurance and cell phone bills, a long list of financial threads tethering me to them. For years, these transfers were a source of quiet resentment, but also perverse hope. Each payment a small knock on their door, a silent plea. See what I do for you? Am I worthy yet? Now, looking at the list, I felt nothing but a cold resolve. My money had fueled my own erasure, the fee I paid to be allowed to exist in their orbit. My cursor hovered over the first transfer, the one for their mortgage. A faint tremor ran through my hand. This was the point of no return. This was a deliberate act of separation. It felt like stepping off a cliff. But the alternative, stepping back onto that familiar, soul-crushing ground, was unthinkable. My heart wasn't pounding. It was beating with a slow, steady rhythm. I clicked the button next to the transfer. A small menu appeared. I selected Cancel Scheduled Payment. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer? I took a deep breath and clicked Confirm. The line item on the screen grayed out, then vanished. A tiny change on a web page, but it felt like a tectonic shift in my soul. One less chain. I moved to the next one. Utilities, cancel, confirm, it disappeared. Then, the big one. Chloe's tuition support, $800, every month. Money I had scraped together by taking on freelance projects that kept me up until 3 a.m. Money that had paid for her spring break trip to Mexico, which my mother had described as a much-needed break from the stress of her studies. I stared at the line item, and for the first time, a flicker of hot, sharp anger pierced my calm. My finger jabbed the trackpad. Cancel. Confirm, gone. One by one, I dismantled the financial scaffolding that had propped up their lives at the expense of my own. My hands had stopped shaking. With each click, I felt lighter. I was reclaiming my life, one transaction at a time. When the list was empty, I stared at the screen. The page now read, "You have no scheduled transfers." I closed the laptop. The quiet in the apartment seemed to expand, to fill with possibility. My money was my own. My time was my own. My life was my own. That afternoon, I started looking for a new apartment. My current place was filled with the ghosts of my old life. I needed a new geography for my new reality. I found a place across the river, a one-bedroom on the 5th floor of a modern building with a wide window that looked out over a park. It wasn't extravagant, but it was bright, and most importantly, anonymous. No one in my family knew this neighborhood. Moving was a purge. I went through my belongings with a ruthless efficiency. Clothes my mother had bought me went into a donation bag. Books with hollow inscriptions from my father were boxed up. Then I found the photos. That was the hardest part. I came across the one of me as a toddler on my father's shoulders, the one where they both looked so happy. The proof that, once, I was enough. I held the silver frame, a wave of grief washing over me, not for the parents I had now, but for the ones in that picture, the ones I had lost before I could even remember them. I allowed myself a single, silent tear. Then I took the photo out of its frame, slid it into an envelope, and put it in the box with the books. I wouldn't display it, but I couldn't throw it away. It was a relic from a forgotten country. When I moved into the new apartment, I took only what was truly mine. The walls were stark white. I didn't hang any pictures. For the first few weeks, I lived in that clean, empty space, letting the quiet settle around me. There were no demands, no passive-aggressive texts, no sudden financial emergencies. I would sit by the large window with my morning coffee and watch the sunlight filter through the leaves. The silence was no longer heavy. It was light. It was potential. It was the sound of my own life waiting to be lived. I hadn't just canceled a few payments, I had canceled my subscription to their reality. And in the quiet, clean space of my new home, I was finally ready to create my own. The freedom I felt in my personal life began to spill over into my work. For years, my career had been a means to an end, a way to earn enough prestige to finally get my parents' attention. I had been cautious, overly prepared, and desperate for approval, which often made me hesitant to take risks. I did good work, but it was safe work. After cutting ties, that changed. The audience was gone. The only person I had to answer to was myself. A week after I moved, I was in a major strategy meeting at Mr. Sterling's firm. We were trying to land a huge client, a disruptive green tech company, but our pitch felt stale. Everyone was nodding along with the senior VP's uninspired plan. The old Clara would have stayed silent, terrified of being seen as difficult. The new Clara cleared her throat. "I disagree," I said. The words were out before I could second-guess them. The room went silent. The senior vice president, a notoriously arrogant man named Mark, raised an eyebrow. "You disagree, Vance?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Instead of shrinking, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I stood and walked to the whiteboard. "I disagree," I repeated, my voice firm. "This client's brand is built on forward-thinking disruption. We're giving them a pitch from 10 years ago. It's safe, it's boring, and it shows we don't understand who they are." For the next 10 minutes, I laid out a completely new, unconventional strategy that was risky but authentic. I spoke with a passion I didn't know I possessed. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just saying what I believed. When I finished, the room was silent again. Mark looked furious. But Mr. Sterling was leaning forward, a slow smile spreading across his face. "That," he said, his voice booming in the quiet room, "is the best idea I've heard all year. Vance, you're leading the new pitch. Make it happen." I walked out of that meeting feeling 10 feet tall. It wasn't about the praise, it was about the feeling of using my own voice and trusting my own instincts. For the first time, my success at work felt like it belonged to me and me alone. It wasn't a gift to be laid at my parents' feet. My name, Clara Vance, started to mean something on its own. Life opened up in other ways too. I had spent so many years working that I had very few real friends. But a few weeks after the dinner, I got a text from a number I hadn't seen in a while. It was Leo Martinez. We'd been close in college, but had drifted apart as my life became consumed by work and family obligations. "Hey, stranger," the text read. "Heard you graduated. We should celebrate. Thai food and cheap wine for old time's sake." The old Clara would have made an excuse. She would have been too scared of letting someone in. But I wasn't her anymore. "I'd love that," I typed back. He showed up at my new apartment that Friday with takeout and 2 bottles of wine. He didn't comment on the sparse furniture. He just grinned. "So," he said as we sat on the floor, eating out of cardboard boxes, "you look different." "Different how?" I asked. "I don't know," he mused, lighter, like you're breathing again. His words hit me with such force I had to put my food down. He saw it. Someone actually saw it. "I think I am," I said, and a real, genuine smile spread across my face. "I think I'm finally living." That evening, I told him everything. I laid out the facts of my life like a story that had happened to someone else. Leo listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Wow," he said softly. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I knew your family was intense, but I had no idea." He reached out and put his hand over mine. "What you did, walking out like that? That was the bravest damn thing I've ever heard." And then we just talked. We laughed until my stomach hurt. It was so easy. It was just connection. Later, as he was leaving, he looked around my bare apartment. "You know," he said, "this place has good bones, but it needs some life. Maybe a ridiculously colorful rug." "Maybe," I said, smiling. After he left, I stood in my quiet living room and felt a profound contentment. I had spent my life believing love was something you had to earn. But sitting on the floor with Leo, I realized that wasn't true. Connection wasn't a reward. It was something you built with people who saw you for exactly who you were. That night, I went online and bought a ridiculously colorful rug. It was the first thing I had ever bought for myself that served no practical purpose. It was just for joy. When it arrived a few days later, I spread it on the floor, a bright, defiant patch of color in my quiet, peaceful life. Life settled into a new rhythm. My days were filled with challenging work, and my evenings were my own. Leo and I fell into an easy friendship that was quickly becoming something more. The constant, low-level anxiety that had been my companion for years had vanished. I was healing. Then, about 3 months after the dinner, there was a knock at my door. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was curled up on my colorful rug, reading a book. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the peephole and my blood ran cold. It was them, my parents, standing in the hallway of my anonymous building, looking as out of place as 2 marble statues in a public park. My first instinct was to hide. But then I took a breath. This was my home, my sanctuary. I was not going to hide in my own home. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. "Hello," I said, my voice even. I didn't invite them in. "Clara," my father said, getting straight to the point. There was no apology. "We need to talk to you. It's about Chloe." Of course it was. "What about her?" I asked, my tone flat. "She lost her hospital placement," he said, the words clipped and angry, as if it were somehow my fault. The fellowship she was counting on fell through. And without the supplemental income, we're having trouble with her tuition. We need your help. Help. The word hung in the air. They stood on my doorstep after months of silence, not to see if I was okay, not to apologize, but to ask for money. They had not come for their daughter. They had come for their ATM. I looked from my father's tense face to my mother's impassive one. She expected me to fold. "No," I said. It was just one word, but it felt like the loudest sound in the world. My father blinked, genuinely shocked. "What did you say?" I said, "No," I repeated, my voice stronger. "I will not be giving you any more money." My mother's jaw tightened. "Don't be ridiculous, Clara. This is your sister. This is her future. Family helps each other." "Family?" I let out a short, hollow laugh. "That's a word you only seem to use when you need something. The last time we were a family, you told me you wished I was never born. I wasn't shouting. I was just stating a fact. My shield. We were angry," my mother snapped. "You made a scene. You can't hold that against us forever." It was the same excuse from her text message. She was blaming me for her own cruelty. "You weren't just angry," I replied, my voice calm and clear. "You were honest. For the first time, you told me the truth of where I stand. And I believe you." "This is about family loyalty, Clara," my father boomed. "After all we've done for you." "You raised me to be your financial backup plan," I interrupted, my patience gone. "You talk about loyalty, but loyalty is a two-way street. You were never loyal to me. You were my owners, not my team." They stared at me, speechless. They had no script for this. I looked at them, at their expensive clothes and hard faces, and I felt a sudden, profound pity. They were trapped in their narrow world where daughters were assets. "This conversation is over," I said, my voice softening with finality. "If you had come here to apologize, to try and understand, I would have listened. But you came for more. You came for help. And that conversation, the one where I am your resource, ended the night you erased me from your lives. Please go." My mother looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of rage and disbelief. She saw the person standing before her was not the quiet girl she had raised. She was a stranger, and a stranger owed her nothing. She turned without another word and walked away. My father hesitated, gave me one last look of utter defeat, and followed her. I watched them go, and for the first time I felt no urge to chase them, no pang of regret. I just felt peace. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. The sanctuary was secure. I had faced the monster, and I had not flinched, and I was still free. With that final severing of ties, it felt as if a massive reservoir of energy had been unlocked within me. The mental space occupied by my family drama for 28 years was now free. I poured all of it into my work and myself. The results were explosive. The pitch I designed was a resounding success. We won the account, one of the largest the firm had ever landed. Mr. Sterling made me lead strategist on the project. I assembled a team and led with collaboration and trust, treating them the way I had always wanted to be treated. Our campaign was a huge hit, and my name became synonymous with a new, more human-centric approach to marketing. My rise at the firm was meteoric. I was promoted to director, the youngest in the company's history. This success felt different. It wasn't about proving my worth. It was simply the natural outcome of me finally being myself. One day, a journalist from a major business magazine called. They were doing a feature on new faces in leadership and wanted to interview me. The idea was terrifying, but Leo encouraged me. "Your story is worth telling," he said. During the interview, the journalist, a sharp woman named Sarah, observed, "You lead with remarkable empathy, but also with incredibly strong boundaries. It's an unusual combination. Where does that come from?" The question was personal, but it felt right to answer it honestly, without the ugly details. "It comes from learning a very difficult lesson," I said carefully. "For a long time, I was in a situation where I was taught that love was something you had to earn, and the price was constant self-sacrifice, and it almost destroyed me. I finally realized that real respect isn't a transaction, it's a recognition. And you can't get that recognition from people who see you as a resource instead of a person." My career took off when I stopped trying to earn my worth and started operating from a place of knowing I already had it. "The most important lesson I learned is this." I paused. "You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm." When the magazine came out, my photo was on the cover, but it was that final quote that went viral. My inbox was flooded with messages from strangers all over the world. They wrote about their own toxic families, their own struggles with feeling invisible. "I thought I was the only one," one woman wrote. "Your words gave me courage. I read your quote and cried for an hour," another said. "Then I called a therapist. Thank you." I sat at my desk, overwhelmed. I had felt so profoundly alone for so long. To discover that my quiet, personal pain was a shared human experience was staggering. I had simply stopped apologizing for my own existence, and in doing so, I had inadvertently thrown a lifeline to thousands. This public validation was so different from the parental approval I had once craved. That had been a desperate hunger. This was a confirmation, a chorus of voices rising up to say, "We see you, we hear you. You are not alone." And that was 1,000 times more healing. A year to the day after the dinner at the Pinnacle Room, my apartment was filled with soft light and easy laughter. The stark white walls were now covered in art, photos of my travels and pictures of my friends. My ridiculously colorful rug was the centerpiece of a room full of people I loved. I hadn't planned it to be on the anniversary. The date only occurred to me that morning, a ghostly echo of another life. Mr. Sterling, my professors, my project team, and Leo, my now partner, were all there. The contrast between this night and that night a year ago was comical. That was a performance. This was home. Later, Leo found me in the kitchen. He raised his glass. "To Clara Vance," he said softly, "who builds better strategies and better lives than anyone I know." He gestured toward the living room. "Look around, Clara. This is the family you built." His words landed directly in my heart. A family I built. Not one I was born into, but one I had created from mutual respect and genuine affection. I looked out at the room full of my people, and tears welled in my eyes, not of grief, but of overwhelming gratitude. Much later, after the last guest had left, I walked out onto my small balcony. A year ago, I had looked out over this same city and felt my world end. Tonight, I looked at the same glittering skyline and felt my world beginning. I thought about the girl from a year ago, so desperate for a scrap of approval. I wished I could go back and tell her what I knew now. So I did. I leaned on the railing, The city lights spread out before me like a carpet of fallen stars, and I whispered to the version of me that used to beg for love. "You're free now," I said softly to the night air. "You don't need their approval. You never did." A profound sense of peace settled over me, deep and unshakable. The wounds from my past were still there. I knew. They were part of my story, the bedrock on which I had built this new life. But they no longer ached. They were just scars, proof of a battle I had survived, a war I had won simply by walking away. The city lights of Chicago flickered and shone below, and in the quiet of my own home, surrounded by the evidence of a life I had built with my own 2 hands, it felt like applause. The end of the story.